Hey, people. Welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Kit, and I'm joined here today with my colleague and good friend. Hey, it's Daniel.
Hey
So,
guys.
so if you've been following our channel, you've probably know that we have been reacting and listening to and getting a more in-depth history about the Pacific War that took place during the Second World War. Shout out to Kings and Generals. They've been really putting together a lot of detailed videos in regards to the buildup of what would be a very devastating conflict uh, for humanity. So, obviously, we're still in the beginning stages of before the conflict really involved the United States and the Allied powers. We're going to be seeing how China was at war with the Empire of Japan. So before we pull up the video, Daniel, is there anything you want to share with our wonderful viewers and subscribers about your thoughts so far on this series?
I want to see more of it.
Fantastic. All right. So then we are still in the beginning stages. This is video 5 titled China at War. Again, please be sure to support the original content creators, Kings and Generals. They do a lot of great work, and it's good to support the original people too. So I hope you got your pens and papers and ready to take some notes because there will be a test at the end of this series. So there you go. All right. So then, without further ado, since I'm in charge of the ones and twos, let's hit this play button one more time.
China is a huge country full of important resources and extensive farmlands, a huge population, and an important strategic and commercial position. This made it a desirable objective for expansion to European colonial powers, but also to the rising Japanese Empire. Within China itself, revolutions, civil wars, and warlordism plagued the nation, as different factions fought to become the ultimate ruler of the country. So today we return to East Asia to cover the divided state of the Chinese people and the start of the Second Sino-Japanese War. If you agree with us that male hygiene is essential in our day and age, the sponsor of this video, Manscaped, is your best bet. For us,
Okay.
Christmas came early this year because we were gifted the new Performance Pack by Manscaped. Let's check it out. Manscaped created the world's first all-in-one men's grooming kit that has you covered from...
this. The
Yes,
ad's probably not valid right now, and I'm not sure Manscaped has approved us to promote it.
yes, that is true. That is very, very
Maybe
true.
one day.
Maybe one day, just not today. So there you go. Hashtag Manscaped. Come talk to us. We'll be more than happy to do a commercial. All right, let's get started with our with the continuation of the video.
By the end of the 18th century, the powerful Qing Empire that controlled the vast lands of China was at its zenith, expanding into Central Asia, increasing in population, and becoming the largest economy in the world. But when the 19th century ended, the golden years of the Qing were long gone. Suffering from military weakness, social unrest, foreign interventions, and economic problems, the Chinese Empire had become a sick state in Asia.
You pause it.
At the start of the 20th
No problem.
Can you-
What's going on?
Can you go back to that previous image real quick?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah. Right when they have all the arrows are on.
Hang on.
weakness, social unrest, foreign interventions, and economic.
Okay.
All right.
I feel that they should do with that dragon what was it Benjamin Franklin did with the all the 13 colonies represented as the snake, or whoever it was that did that, where it's cut into pieces. That's how it feels when they're the way he's talking about it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. But by the way, again, during this time too, it's not surprising seeing how exactly China was suffering by the European powers at the time, the colonial powers. There's been a lot of upheaval that Europe did in China during this time, and so already we're seeing a large nation become easily fractured, which would eventually lead to the rise of people like again Mao and so many others that were
Yeah.
vying for power with the aftermath of the Qing dynasty.
Yeah, ironically, if China wasn't so weak here, Japan would have not pushed their army so far so that Mao could come to power. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like China had the ability, if it decided to industrialize, but it chose not to.
Yep. Until the invasion of Japan.
Problems. The Chinese Empire had become a sick state in Asia. At the start of the 20th century, as young officers and scholars debated the overthrow of the failing dynasty, a military uprising ended with the proclamation of the Republic of China on January 1st, 1912. Dictatorially led by Yuan Shikai, who controlled the modernized Beiyang army, the new Chinese Republic was held in a fragile balance between the nationalists and the republicans. With an iron fist, Yuan managed to keep the country together, but his methods severely antagonized the Kuomintang revolutionaries, eventually dissolving the Nationalist Party and declaring himself Emperor of China in 1915. This attempt caused widespread rebellions in numerous provinces, leading to the establishment of warlord states throughout China after the death of Yuan. Meanwhile, Kuomintang loyalists retreated to the south and established a government led by Sun Yat-sen with the objective of reuniting the fragmented.
I'm sorry, is that the flag of Taiwan?
Well,
Right
didn't they
there.
get pushed over when they got pushed out of China?
Yeah. Again, yeah. I'm just noticing that it looks similar to it, unless
Yeah, well, Taiwan's the remnant of
Yeah.
the nationalist government.
yeah. All right. Sorry. Hey, my eyes are getting old, folks. That's
Well, no,
they're not the.
kids like my eyes are getting old as he points out something obscure that I didn't even notice.
Nation. After the end of the Great War, massive popular demonstrations and manifestations occurred against Japanese interests in the country and against the government of the Beiyang warlords, ushering in the creation of the Chinese Communist Party and its alliance with the Kuomintang. As the warlords continued to fight among themselves for the ultimate control of Beijing, Chiang Kai-shek would succeed Sun Yat-sen as leader of the Kuomintang after his death, quickly setting out to prepare for a military campaign against the northern warlords. With the success of the northern expedition, half of China would be under the control of the nationalists by 1927, but Chiang's own purging of communists within the Kuomintang would unexpectedly lead to the creation of the Red Army and the start of the civil war between communists and nationalists. By the end of 1928, Chiang's northern expedition ended in complete success, finally conquering Beijing and bringing the whole of China under the nominal control of the Kuomintang.
I'll pause it real quick.
Although some warlords
Gotta quote my buddy Bill Wirtz. China's whole again, then it broke again. But it's interesting. I didn't really realize that the trigger to creating the Red Army was that they were purging communists from their ranks, and they organized.
Jeez, one would have to wonder what would happen if they didn't do that.
I feel like for the most part, communist groups only come to power when the people in charge are really screwing up. We saw that the Tsar could not have screwed up his rule of Russia any worse before the Communist Revolution. And China look at the state it's in. You really couldn't be in a worse position to get communism.
Yeah, and plus, let's face it, Tsar Nicholas II. I know that he has been made the center point of one of the reasons why the Russian Empire fell and the rise of Lenin and the Soviet Union. But you have to remember too that the Tsar was also being advised by people who didn't know what they were doing either. So at his newbie, I think that's fair, or
His
acting
dad
like a
refused
noob.
to teach him to be a
Yeah. So a lot of things were working against the Tsar. I know we're focusing on the Asian War for a second, is the specific.
But
war for a
it's
second,
about the connection
Yeah.
between. I'm just kind of realizing as they're talking about this, like the common link of the two largest countries to adopt communism. Even though, let's be real, neither actually. There's never been a communist country. Communism in its original form has no centralized governance or leadership. It's communes that are voting together. It's almost like regional democracies, and not exactly, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anytime you have an authoritative ruler, it's not communism anymore. It's an authoritative state-owned process, which is just authoritarianism in just without private property.
Yep. All right, let's play the rest of this video and find out what happens next. Because, hey, what could possibly go wrong?
Still ruled in semi-autonomous states, Chiang's government in Nanking received international recognition and legitimately reformed the Chinese Republic. Meanwhile, the communists continued to resist against nationalist encirclement campaigns, and in the north, the Mukden incident sparked a full-blown Japanese invasion of Manchuria, against which Chiang simply couldn't resist. Nonetheless, the Nanking Decade was a time of consolidation for the nationalists.
Pause
Thus,
it real
Chiang's
quick.
regime would
I really wish, because China, you always read in history, like, something happens in China, 50 million people die. Something else happens in China, 10 million people die. I would love for there, every time China's being mentioned, there to just be a death count. Just like to remind us how many people are dying in China while all this is happening. Because I feel like it isn't brought up when China's talked about. Just like, I feel like the same goes with the USSR. Just put a counter of how many people are dying when this is happening. Because I think it just makes it would just make the context even more forceful that they're trying to make.
I could see like somebody doing like a counter, but with like a Rick and Morty style. And this year, 10 million people died, or something like that. Or use it at like but this month nobody died. Everyone was kind of cool.
Yeah.
would embark on a modernization effort, successfully improving its economy and renegotiating some of the foreign concessions, and also starting the training of loyal and elite divisions with the aid of German advisors. Eventually, the
Oh, boy.
communists would be finally routed at Jiangxi in 1934, but the Red Army would manage to break through the Kuomintang encirclement, starting the Long March to the northwest. Led by Mao Zedong, the main column would successfully avoid the pursuit of Kuomintang forces and would march for an entire year through more than 9,000 kilometers until arriving at Shanxi,
That's where you
where
need a
Mao
death
became
counter.
the undisputed leader.
What's up?
That's where you need a death counter.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
imagine they're probably just going to villages, taking all their food, letting those people die. The people coming up behind them, and they're punishing the villagers for letting their food be taken. Plus the attrition and the sickness.
Yeah, and plus, yeah, God. Yeah, well, hey, revolutions are not clean and easy. So there you go. They're not. Oh my goodness. Now as you're really thinking about it, all this is a recipe for disaster for Japan to invade even further.
Because they're trying. China's like, okay, well, let's take out the Communist Party. And Japan's like, no, attack here. Or defend here. Ignore them. You don't have the troops to do both.
Leader of the party. From their new base at Yan'an, the communists would continue to resist Chiang's attacks for the next few years. This period would also see increased Japanese aggression in the north, rapidly expanding their puppet states into the Chahar and Jehol provinces, and threatening the important city of Beijing. But Chiang took a passive position against Japan, and considered the communists to be a greater danger to the Chinese Republic.
You're killing your own people, you jagoff.
Yeah. Ironically, he's right in the wrongest way possible.
Yeah.
Stating that communism was cancer, while the Japanese only represented a superficial wound. This policy of compromise was very unpopular in China and within the Kuomintang itself, which prompted some disgruntled nationalist generals to conspire with the communists to capture Chiang and force him into a truce with the CCP. Meanwhile, the Sui-Yuan campaign of Prince Demchuk Donggrup failed miserably, and General Fu Zuoyi managed to inflict heavy casualties on the Inner Mongolian army, alerting the conspirators that this was the time to act while morale was high against the Japanese. So on December 12, 1936, Chiang was detained in the Xi'an incident and had to negotiate with the communists for 2 weeks, finally deciding to cease hostilities against them to prepare for an impending war with Japan. And
Exactly.
Now,
You have no
ironic-
time for inner conflict. There is no time.
Well, it's like he's in a dilemma. He has no good positions, because if he just deals with the CCP, everything gets taken over by Japan. If he doesn't deal with the CCP as he's currently doing, it'll eventually take over because he'll be wiped out.
Well, see, the thing is, he did this to himself by systematically trying to go after everyone that was, I guess, a communist in his ranks. You know, if they didn't do that, there
Yeah,
probably would not have been. Probably, I'm
Maybe.
using a pinch of salt here, or either that it would not have happened at the fast pace that it did.
Yeah,
It would be more gradual.
Or communism gets so big in the military that they depose him and Mao comes to power earlier.
Yeah.
I would love to have someone do like an extra, like I'm looking at you, Cody, do a video on like what would happen. How is there a path? How far back would you have to go for the CCP not to come in power? Because I feel like once it was organized with what's happening with Japan, I'm not sure what could be done. I mean, I think the only answer is effectively China should have modernized 40 or 50 years earlier.
Agreed.
And to form a second united front against the Japanese. By 1937, the Chinese had assembled a large army of 1,700,000 regulars and 557,000 reservists in preparation for the war. But the loyalty of great sections of the army was questionable. It had a low supply of guns and artillery, and it only counted 2 armored units. Unlike China, the Japanese were prepared for total war, with the IJA counting 1,015,000 regulars destined to fight in China and around 78,000 soldiers from their puppet states. The 28 divisions assigned for the war were fully trained, equipped, and experienced, giving them a clear advantage in fighting strength against the Chinese. During the year 1937, a series of border clashes occurred between Chinese and Japanese forces, usually ending with the Chinese writing a humiliating apology. But on July 7th,
Sorry we shot at you. Hopefully things will be okay.
Yeah. It's crazy. The thing that they didn't mention is Japan also did have vehicles. They didn't have a lot of oil for those vehicles. At this point, actually, no, I take that back. At this point, oil was not that big of an issue, although it was a big issue for them because America was supplying them with all the oil they could drink. Well, not a lot, most of it at least, vast majority. But they also had tanks. Now, as we know, like, a lot of Americans think back on like the Japanese tanks, like, oh, haha, you can't touch our Shermans, ha ha ha. But if you're in, mountainous terrain, jungle terrain, or just a very large, like, scape, like China is, and they don't have anti-tank weapons, their tanks are really great.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh my goodness.
It's like they're fighting at people. Half of them don't have rifles. The other half only have rifles.
It's just like that scene from Enemy at the Gates. I don't know if you ever seen that movie, but when the Soviet soldiers are being dumped into Stalingrad, there's a scene where there's I guess a commissar saying, "The one with the rifle shoots. The one without the rifle follows him. When the one with the rifle gets killed, the one with the bullets picks up the rifle and shoots."
And then the other thing is that Japan is an experienced, united military with a large track record, like the only country, because of what they did with Russia, that actually, back when it was Russia, that won against a European power. They have been modernized for a long period of time. They have Western advisors. They've been trained in modern warfare. And China has, like, a group of disgruntled and not fully loyal units that are under disparate commands. I'm sure they're not unified in any way. They barely have training. Their leaders probably don't have that much experience either way. They probably don't have logistics. They don't have armor. They don't have anti-armor weapons. They just got a lot of peasants that some of have guns.
All right, let's play the rest of this and find out what happened at the Marco Polo Bridge.
the Marco Polo Bridge incident to the west of Beijing would ignite a full-scale war between the two countries, as a fire exchange quickly escalated into the Japanese occupation of Tientsin and
Pause that real
Beijing
quick.
by August 8th.
I'm reading the chronology card right there. That's absolutely hysterical. Like, Japan kept, they're like, I need any precedent. Please, I need something. And so this literally, they're reading, when a Japanese soldier failed to return to his post, he just got lost or something, Japan's like, we need permission to friendly move through your entire territory to look for this one lost gentleman. China's like, no. And they're like, okay, you will be invaded.
Okay, or
That's
either
their
that,
pretense.
or either that one soldier wakes up. He had like a huge bender at the bar. He wakes up and says, "Hey, what are you guys doing here? We were looking for you."
It's like I didn't realize that the pretext for the Marco Polo bridge. I really need to learn more. Well, actually, that's what we're doing. We're
Yeah,
learning
that's
more
right.
about it.
Americans learn.
That's what we're doing right now.
That's what you're doing,
Yeah,
Dad. It's
that's
the
why
name
I'm
of
so
the channel.
excited. That's why I'm so excited. But it's so funny that their pretext for this entire thing was, "Hey, dude got lost."
And then I gotta see like whatever happened to the dude. Like he wakes up, it's like, "Yo, Commander, I don't know what time it's at. Don't worry about it. We
No, don't
lost-
tell me you got found. Hide in that suitcase
Yeah,
for
listen.
2 hours.
Listen, you just when we call out your name and we blow out this whistle, then you say, like, here I am. You just stay right there.
Can you imagine how ironic it would be if they were like literally looking for someone and they're about to move in and he's like, "Hey, I'm here. Hide. The
Hide.
whole point is that we can't find you."
Damn it, Bobby. There's probably no one in Japan named Bobby at the time. Damn it, Bobby. We told you to just stay hidden. I'll yell at you later.
Tokyo was very happy with the outcome of the campaign, but it was reluctant to declare war on the Chinese, as the Japanese didn't want to divert forces from the Manchurian border with the Soviet
Pause it
Union,
one more time.
where
I got-
several
I'm sorry to keep pausing. There's just so much to say.
Yep.
Japan's reluctant to declare war on China. Japan snuck attack everyone without declaring war. What are you talking about? Japan was happy to consistently not declare war on a country they're invading, is how I would have worded that.
Yes, exactly. Maybe someone needs to look at the script a little bit better.
border conflicts had been happening in the last few years. But Chiang had had enough, and he consequently mobilized his entire forces to fight against Japan's aggression. The war had thus begun. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, fighting broke out between Chinese troops under Zhang Jizhong and the 4,000-strong Japanese Marines that defended 30,000 Japanese civilians.
I forgot they
Tokyo
owned-
quickly reinforced.
What's up?
I forgot that because of World War One, they were able to get access to the German city
Yep.
that Germany controlled. So now they have a foothold in China to have a second front, and they have a navy that can actually supply that.
Yep, exactly. And we learned that from our previous videos from Americans Learn. So
All coming
hashtag
together.
be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe.
the Shanghai defenders with 20,000 more Marines, commanded by General Matsui Iwane, and also ordered the 3rd Fleet to open fire on Chinese positions. Shanghai was of the utmost importance for Chiang's regime, so he sent his most loyal men to have numerical superiority in the struggle. Chinese air operations also managed to inflict severe damage over the 3rd Fleet with their advanced biplane and monoplane designs. The Battle of Shanghai was brutal, with heavy losses on each side, but to no effect, as in the urban center, the fighting reached a stalemate. Furthermore, Japanese naval landings to the north forced the Chinese to disperse their forces along a front line that spanned from the Huangpu River to the coast north of Shanghai. At the same time, an expeditionary force of the Kwantung Army advanced southwards through Inner Mongolia, crushing the Chinese at the battles of Nankou, Huailai, and Kalgan with the superior firepower of their tanks. These forces would then advance to Shaanxi, taking Taiyuan and completing the conquest of Inner Mongolia by November 7th, while from Beijing, the Japanese would advance to occupy the North China Plain. On the seas, the IJN would also start a naval blockade all around China, hoping to prevent foreign aid from reaching the nation, as the Western powers strongly condemned the Japanese invasion. In September and October,
Hey, that's our territory. You can't take it.
Now you know what? You know what's really again, because I'm pretty sure you're going to talk about Nanking and what happened in Hong Kong as well. This is a very brutal
Yeah.
and horrific campaign that took place
Yeah.
where millions of civilians lost their lives. It's just it's gonna start getting crazy. And the thing is, again with Nanking, I know we mentioned this in previous episodes, but the very fact that you have someone who is part of Nazi Germany who was I guess an ambassador there. I forget what his
I think he was.
job.
Yeah, he was something like that.
Yeah, talking about human rights. It's like
Yeah.
if God was writing a script for how this was playing out, he's like, hey guys, I got a twist for this script right here. I'm gonna have someone talk about humanitarian and human rights, and you won't believe who he's with.
Yeah. The crazy thing is that if China had not become communist after, if they hadn't won, Japan, a lot more Japanese nobles and higher ups would have been killed in a Nuremberg style trial, especially the Emperor's son,
Yeah.
who led this. But because we wanted a bulwark against communist China, we sort of let things go after the war. But none of that's played out yet. But I mean, yeah, it's like I do wish that people saw Japan for the war criminals they were, and that had been dealt with. But we're sort of, we're too many years past it to really, mean anything, to do anything in the modern times.
Oh, by the way, the German businessman and Nazi party member, his name was John Rabe, Johnrabe, from Hamburg, born in November 1882, and he saved and sheltered approximately 250. Oh wow, 250,000 people from being killed.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
jeez Louise, I didn't know that.
As Matsui's forces managed to capture Luodian and Luhang, more Japanese reinforcements arrived that successfully wrestled control of the critical position at Dachang. With Dachang lost, the Chinese forces started to withdraw from Shanghai on November 7th, but the retreat quickly turned into a rout, and Chiang lost most of his loyal and elite men. Overall, the Chinese suffered more than 250,000 casualties in the struggle, while the Japanese only suffered around 90,000 casualties. Weakened by the defeat at Shanghai, disparate Chinese units established defenses around their capital, led by Commander Tang Shenji. At the same time, Matsui started a pincer movement directed towards Nanking, defeating the already battered Chinese soldiers and reaching the Chinese capital with haste by December 9th. What followed was a bloody struggle on the outskirts of Nanking, one in which superior Japanese firepower would win the day yet again, even despite the fierce resistance of Tang's men. As the Chinese defenses were collapsing and the Japanese encircled the city, Chiang ordered the abandonment of Nanking on December 11th, but only a small force led by Tang himself could break out of the Japanese encirclement on December 13th. The rest of the defenders, along with some 200,000 civilians, were slaughtered during the Nanking massacre. The Nanking population was also subjected to rape, looting, and arson by the Japanese soldiers in what the West came to describe as the Rape of Nanking. By the end of the year, Japanese successes thus far would allow them to establish collaborationist governments in Beijing.
So yeah, the rape of Nanking is like such a horrific existence. Every woman was raped in that city. People were beheaded in contests. People were given flammable liquid to drink and then shot so they would explode. They would get people to run into the middle of rivers and ice in the winter, and then they would shoot it so they would drown. They would get people in a line to dig ditches, and they would behead them. People behind them would push them in the ditches. Then they would dig ditches, and then it was horrific. It's like it's to such a degree that at some point when I was reading on like how the Japanese treated the Chinese civilians, it's like at least the Germans were structural and just like it says, it's a factory, you're gonna die, you're gonna go in there, then you're gonna move out of there, and then we're gonna use your ashes as fertilizer. Where Japan's like having a great amount of fun with it.
By the way, I'm still trying to find the movie that again it was shot with it was set in that era, and I know John Rabe, they have at least a German playing that character or the real life person. It's a very difficult film to watch, but I would recommend it.
It's like, again, we don't talk a lot in the West about what happened to China, and it's mainly because China became communist, and who likes communists? We're in a Cold War. Doesn't matter if they suffer, but at the time, it's like it wasn't hidden that this was happening. Newspapers everywhere were. It was like front page news that this was happening. Everyone knew it was happening.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
In Shanghai and Nanking, and to reform its Inner Mongolian puppet into the new Mengjiang government. At this point, Tokyo was expecting that the Chinese would capitulate after the fall of their capital, as they were eager to end the war and further prepare for a confrontation with the Soviet Union. But Chiang would continue to reject the harsh demands of the invaders, thus moving the capital to the industrial center of Hankow. Moreover, the Japanese forces, encouraged by the many victories achieved, continued to escalate the war in China and tried to establish a connection between Beijing and Nanking. Already in the early months of 1938, naval landings in Tsingtao culminated with the occupation of northern Shandong by March, although the Japanese advance would be stopped for the first time in the Battle of Taiyuan. This was a huge morale booster for the Chinese, and as the leader of the battle was warlord Li Zongren, there would be much more unity among the warlord and Kuomintang forces after this battle. Nonetheless, the Japanese would manage to encircle the major crossroads of Suzhou, which protected the new capital at Hankow. Chiang recognized that the defense of the town was futile, so he ordered his forces to withdraw and to demolish the dikes holding back the Yellow River, trying to slow down the Japanese advance. The resulting Yellow River flood inflicted heavy casualties on the Japanese and forced them to move up the Yangtze River, but it also caused incalculable destruction on the area and killed almost 500,000 civilians.
My God.
Yeah, I think 250,000 civilians were killed when they did that.
Mm.
And
My
it's like it didn't. It just. I mean, it killed some Japanese, but not as many as it did their own.
Yeah,
citizens.
because the land then becomes unusable. So many crops and livestock destroyed, homes destroyed.
But also the fact that everyone lives near water. So if you're living near the river and that's your irrigation for your crops and that's where everyone lives, when you flood it, all those people die.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not like they're going to go to each of those villages and tell them, because then the Japanese will know and they'll move out of the way, and then there's no point in doing it.
Yeah, hey everyone, heads up. That's not how it works.
Most of the Chinese soldiers, however, managed to retreat and establish solid defenses around Hankow. At the same time, the Japanese successfully invaded Amoy Island to prepare for more naval invasions, and they also started bombing operations over Hankow and the Sichuan region. But the main objective of the Japanese advance was now the city of Hankow, and Tokyo finally destined most of their resources for this campaign. On June 15th, the battle for Hankow started with the Japanese naval invasion of Anqing, followed by a string of successful naval invasions along the coast, an attack along the southern shore of the Yangtze River, and a two-pronged assault through the Dabia Mountains. The success of these operations meant that, by October, the Chinese defenses on the provinces of Henan.
I mean, you can just see it on this map. Mm-hmm. China doesn't defend in the north, therefore they're going to get outflanked, therefore their supply line's going to get cut off, and it doesn't matter how strong their position is, which looks very formidable in the mountain ranges right there.
Agreed.
If you're going to be surrounded.
Agreed. And you know, the thing is, again, this just should show just how far Japan came in regards towards being industrialized and modernizing its entire equipment, because again, it would not be able to make as much of an advancement had China done the same thing too at the time.
Yeah, this is all thanks to Perry.
Yep. Curses upon you, Admiral Perry.
Henan, Jiangxi, and Hubei were in a difficult position, leaving the way open to attack Hankow. Yet the Chinese would also succeed at stopping the Japanese advance through Wanjialing, and managed to mount a counterattack north of the Yangtze towards Taihu and Susong. But despite the fierce resistance of the Chinese, on October 21st, the Japanese naval invasion of Guangzhou ended in complete success, occupying the main port through which foreign aid was flowing and completing the encirclement of Hankow. With the fall of Guangzhou, the Chinese had no other alternative but to abandon their second capital on October 25th. But the 4-month-long resistance had at least gained much time for Chiang to prepare a new wartime capital at Chongqing and to prepare his forces to wage a war of attrition against the Japanese. Yet again, Tokyo hoped to end the war with the fall of Hankow, but to no avail, as the Chinese were determined to continue their resistance. Moreover, the Japanese forces had suffered many losses during the Hankow campaign and were very exhausted as well. In the last months of the year, the Japanese would continue to consolidate their control over the Wuhan and Canton regions, but they could already see that the war would be more prolonged than they had anticipated. Next week, we'll cover the continuation of the Sino-Japanese War.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah,
Hold on, let me go ahead and remove this.
And you
All
can
right.
you can see so clearly how it's like, again, this is a very standard sort of cookie cutter, in a sense, outcome. It's super powerful, highly superior military army invades area. Area army loses disastrously and continuously, losing huge numbers of troops and civilians for a period of time. But eventually, super advanced military starts running out of super trained soldiers, logistics. It reminds me of this. It's separate from this, but it sort of makes the same point.
Yeah.
How near the end of the war, when it became a world war, when it was America and Japan, as a stat I was like, one American soldier at any given time had about 2 tons of supplies that could be readily made available to them. Maybe it's plasma,
Yeah.
maybe it's ammunition, maybe it's new weaponry, maybe it's vehicle support, maybe it's
Food.
or artillery shell support,
Yeah.
or airplanes' ability to help them in wherever they're at. And Japan had 2 pounds to offer to its people near the end of the war, and so you can imagine that math. I'm sure it wasn't always 2 pounds. I'm sure when the war in China started, they had a lot more than 2 pounds to offer per soldier. But as their military, it sort of reminds me of how Napoleon in Spain, just that you can see this like never-ending guerrilla war starting. Because it's like when you get to the point where you're that badly beaten, your only real option is Fabian tactics.
Well, the other thing too is that, again, Japan is starting to overextend itself. It's going to start antagonizing other global powers, and the thing is, this is even before our conflict, before Japan made any kind of military conflict with the United States. But this is again the beginning stages, and while it may not seem like that early on in the war, of Japan's downfall, because they overextended their forces. They were occupying a landmass that was far larger than their home country or any of the other territories that they colonized at the time. They're not ready for it, and they can't maintain it. They cannot maintain it, and it's also earning condemnation from the global powers at the time.
And not just condemnation. It's condemnation from the people that are supplying it with the raw materials to continue the war that they're in. So it's they're doing something that, I mean, you can sort of just see this as soon as things start to slow down, like what Japan really did need. And so it's like Japan made as many risky bets in leading up to the Second World War as Germany did in the First World War, and they paid off at about the same rate.
Exactly.
They were like, okay, we've taken over most of China, let's capitulate. But as they said, that their demands were just too hard on China. I'm sure if they said, "Hey, we'll take Manchuria, we'll take a little bit beyond Manchuria, and then we'll be at peace," Japan would have had a lot more troops defending the islands in the island hopping campaign. They would have had a lot more material available, and they could have invaded the Soviets right when Germany was, and that could have actually been a real big issue, because, as you know, the turning point right around Stalingrad happens once the non-aggression pact with Japan is signed, and they can pull those troops out of that area. If the Soviets have to fight on 2 fronts, that war could have ended. Well, it would have been worse for the USSR, but I'm not sure what would have changed the tides. But they would have bled a lot more than they currently did.
Yeah. Well, folks, we're going to be continuing on with our adventure in the, or at least our learning lesson in the Pacific War. So tune in next time to Americans Learn. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit that ring bell notification. That way you're made aware when we upload new content. So I want to give a huge thank you to my colleague, Daniel, and I want to give a huge thank you to you. That's right, you watching us. So my name is Kit, and we'll see you next time
If
for you to
you've
get
made
your
it-
learn on.
If you've made it to the end of this video, type PogChamp in chat. Why
Hey,
not?
why not?
No one will
Why not?
understand it except us.
Why not? There you go. All right, folks. See you next time.